Good afternoon, everybody. Neil Albrecht, Executive Director for the City of Milwaukee Election Commission. Obviously, a lot of public eyes right now on next week, Tuesday's election. I want to provide an update. I think there's obviously a great deal of understandable public concern about access to voting for this election and public health. Certainly, first and foremost, that is very high up on our agenda. Wanting to administer this election in a way that protects the public and protects our election workers, but also provides the greatest level of access to voters. First of all, I think we probably want to start with the most common mechanism right now for voting, and that is the by-mail absentee. I have some statistics that I can share. Number one, we are receiving on average somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 absentee requests per day. In total, the City of Milwaukee has issued just over 70,000 by-mail absentee ballots. I'll often refer back to the most recent statistic, which was the 2016 presidential election, where we had 15,000 by-mail absentee ballots. So for us to have so rapidly retooled the department to go from a model of polling place voting to by-mail absentee voting has been really significant. Again, we anticipate that by next week, Tuesday, that by-mail number should be somewhere between 90 and 100,000 absentee ballots. We regret that there was some delay in the issuing of absentee ballots. We actually, like a lot of municipalities across the state, ran out of supplies. We had anticipated that we would get envelopes in time to prevent a slowdown of operations, but our printer ran 2 days behind schedule. So that held us back where we were not able to mail out absentee ballots for 2 days. We know that voters are very concerned right now about receiving their absentee ballots. We have over 100 people right now involved in the assembling and in the mailing of those absentee ballots. And we believe that we are catching up, and that anybody who has requested a ballot prior to March 25th should be receiving their ballots either today or tomorrow, and then we expect to get to something around a 3 or a 4 day turnaround time. State law still stands. Absentee ballots have to be received by election day, Tuesday, April 7th, by the close of the polls at 8 p.m. Obviously, that heightens the public's concern around absentee voting by mail if they recognize that there may not be sufficient time to turn around and return that absentee ballot. That's why we established our drop box locations across the geography of the City of Milwaukee. Those drop boxes are always open every day of the week, Sunday through Saturday, from 8 a.m. until 1 p.m. and are located at the Mill Road Library, the Washington Park Library, the Bayview Library, the Zablocki Library, and at the Zeidler Municipal Building. We always have an election worker there on staff to sign as the witness to any voter that is turning in their absentee ballot. So we know that people have been concerned about the witness signature and being able to meet the witness signature requirement. Again, there's been no change, no provision in state law that recognizes that for people who are self-confined or quarantined, that securing a witness signature on their absentee ballot may present a significant hardship. So we are working with our absentee voters as best we can within the constraints of state law to be able to have those absentee ballots compliant and to be counted on election day. I know there are many pending lawsuits right now one of them related to the signature requirement on absentee ballots. We're hopeful for some movement in that area. But again, we just ask the public to please be as patient as possible. We are caught up on sending out those absentee ballots. What we struggled with in the city of Milwaukee is obviously not unique to this municipality. I know that there are municipalities in the state that are again running out of absentee ballot envelopes, even after our shipments from the Wisconsin Elections Commission. Our goal is to get ballots out as quickly as possible, knowing that people have until April 7th to return them. But again, just want to encourage the public to take advantage of those drop box if you are concerned about mail delivery time. I think since we did our last briefing, the city very successfully rolled up drive-up early voting. That's happening outside the Zeidler Municipal Building. We've had 1,153 voters so far in the 3 days that it's been in operation, not including today. So just averaging a little under 400 people per day. I would imagine or anticipate that those numbers will increase significantly as we get closer to the election. Just a reminder to everybody, the hours for the drive-up early voting are Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. And then also on Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. You should anticipate, if you are going to vote, an approximately 45-minute wait time, although I will say during the weekdays, it has been slower than it was on the weekends. So it was difficult. It was a very difficult decision for the city of Milwaukee to shut down those early voting locations. I want to again be clear around why that decision was made. We had over 500 people per day voting at those early voting sites, and that was placing both the election workers and the public at risk for COVID-19. The drive-through voting, which uses all sanitized equipment, our election workers are wearing gloves and face masks. Many of the voters who appear are also wearing gloves and face masks. We believe is the most reduced risk mechanism right now for providing voting in the city of Milwaukee. We would like to expand to more locations. We just don't have the staffing or the capacity to be able to do that. I do believe that election workers are truly the unsung heroes right now, because they are certainly placing themselves at some level of risk every time they are interacting with a member of the public. As with election day polling place workers, we have had some challenges recruiting a sufficient number of people even to work at the drive-up early voting. I think finally where we see the greatest uncertainty right now is what election day voting will look like, and in terms of the operation of the city's traditional neighborhood-based voting sites. For a normal election, we would be operating 180 voting sites in the city of Milwaukee. That will not be possible on April 7th, and the public needs to be prepared for that impossibility and what that might mean to their voting experience. I think the city of Milwaukee has maintained a long-standing tradition of voting sites that are very often within walking distance of a voter's home. We will not be able to do that on April 7th. We will be going toward a model of voting centers, which is a consolidation of voting sites. That consolidation will occur, certainly it could even involve combining aldermanic districts, not just combining voting sites. So that could bring a lot of people to a single site. We're very concerned about that in terms of the community gathering of a voting site on election day being contradictory to public health guidelines. But at this point, by state law, we do have to make some model of in-person voting available to the public, but we have to do that within the limited constraints of a dwindling election worker staff. Earlier this week, we were down to 400 election workers of the 1,400 that we would normally use. So it's a minimal amount of staff that are available to us. And so that means considerably fewer voting sites for the public on election day. We are hoping later this week to actually be able to announce those sites and push that information out to the public as rapidly as possible. Obviously, at those voting sites, the community gathering aspect aside, we are going to do everything possible in collaboration with the Milwaukee Health Department to ensure those sites are operating under CDC guidelines in terms of the operation of a voting site on election day. So going forward, we're still concerned about access to voting, who has access to voting in this election, who may not have access due to self-confinement or fear of contagion. Many people don't have access to the internet to have readily available ability to apply for an absentee ballot online. We've been taking literally hundreds, if not thousands, of phone calls per day from voters concerned about how they are going to vote in this election. Obviously, it's a very significant challenge to the Election Commission and to the city to administer this election in the midst of a pandemic.